Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Coming today from the stage at the Giga Theatre at the Sydney Everything Electric show. Kind of special, but we're recording this after most of the audience has left and some of the crew are all chatting over there, but we'll ignore them. And I'm here with Dan Caesar, CEO of the Fully Charged Show, and we haven't caught up. Actually, we've both been so busy, we've barely even spoken since we've been here, but we haven't caught up doing a podcast for a long time, and there's a lot happening.
Well, you've been down here for how long?
A couple of months, I think now.
A couple of months?
Yeah.
And have you had a good trip?
It's been amazing, yeah. And also, because we also went to New Zealand, so it's been a bit special. We got over to New Zealand and did some episodes there, done lots of episodes here. We're now doing this here.
What were the standout episodes? I'm not interviewing you, why am I doing this?
Yeah,
what were the standout episodes?
I think really noticeably the ferry that's being built in Hobart in Tasmania is just extraordinary. I mean, because of the scale of it. So to see an electric machine, battery electric machine that size, it's massive. You know, it's a huge, ferry. It's an extraordinary. I mean, I think even if it had a diesel engine, it would be quite interesting because it's a really big catamaran. It's got two hulls. It goes really fast through the water. It's got jets that come out the water that fire water hundreds of meters out the back to push it along. I mean, that's extraordinary enough, but it's all electric.
When does it go into service?
It's going to have sea trials around October, November, and it will go over to, it's going to be in South America. It's being used, and it will be there, I think, early next year, I think, realistically.
Very exciting.
But incredible, yeah, really exciting. And the one stat I can't help remembering is it's about 250 tons lighter than if they'd built it with diesel engines and fuel tanks.
Wow.
So
Okay.
if it had fuel tanks full and all the diesel engines, which are massive and heavy, that's what it would. So it's an electric vehicle that's lighter than the diesel equivalent, which is quite extraordinary. Anyway, that was really exceptional. The cherry farm, amazing cherries. We did eat a lot of cherries. We were allowed to eat as many as we wanted. And the Vesev, the hydrofoil boat was incredible. That was amazing. I mean, everything we've seen. The Janus truck, which is here, the batteries, I mean, that is like, come on, guys, let's sort this out and do it everywhere because, we've now seen it. I think the first time I saw that, which was a couple of years ago, it was functioning and there was one truck that worked for one company delivering sand in Brisbane. There's now dozens of them all over Australia and they're saving the trucking companies millions of dollars in fuel because you kind of forget, you fill a big truck like that up, it only does like 2 miles to the gallon or whatever it would be. It uses huge amounts of diesel fuel, if you're moving 90 tons of cement. They're massive trucks. I mean, they're really big. Anyway, so
one of my favourite things about the last decade of working with you is that we've taken these stories, things that are happening in different parts of the world, and we've shown other parts of the world that they're possible. The electric ferry, the electric farm, effectively with the cherries.
It was 100% electric.
The hydrofoil, the battery swapping on the big rigs. I mean, so doing that really it's been a privilege, hasn't it? And we're very, very lucky to do it.
And I mean, also the fact that a lot of it is actually here. I mean, this show has been, for me, I think one of the most remarkable we've ever done. And I can't keep up with the stats, but the amount of test drives we're doing here is blistering. It's just the amount of different cars. If nothing else, I spoke to someone today and they said, I'm here all 3 days. If I do a test drive every time I get the chance, I still can't have a go in all the cars that are available. I mean, that's incredible.
I think someone from BYD said on the first morning of this show that they'd pre-booked all the test drives for the entire weekend.
Wow, on Friday morning?
Yeah, so don't tell me there's not enough demand.
Yes.
And the reality is that we all know as electric vehicle drivers that getting people in them
is the big thing. Yeah.
3/4 of the battle, if not half the battle, and that convinces people that's the clincher. So for us, that's just one facet of what we do with the live shows. But I think you're right. End of day 2. I've got a beer here.
I've got a beer.
Just might pep me up a little bit. I'm a little bit tired. On the wrong time zone. We've done 2 days of this most extraordinary show. And it's really revivified my enthusiasm, which is not to say my enthusiasm was on the floor.
But it can take a battering sometimes.
But we work extraordinarily hard against a lot of headwinds, I think, doing what we do, particularly misinformation. And so sometimes to reconnect with the audience, the companies is incredibly powerful. And I would say
really good,
18 shows in.
Yeah, it's 18.
18 shows in 7 years, another 4 later this year. 18 shows in, I think in a way this has been, and I'm not just saying it, it has been the best one yet for a few different reasons, one of which is that we do have everything electric here. Now that's always been our intention.
Yes.
But sometimes you don't get response out of every single sector. Here we've had 35 car companies, a record.
Unbelievable.
But we've also had lots of things like marine.
Yes.
Lots of commercial vehicles, obviously the home tech, loads of micromobility. I think I mentioned commercial vehicles, that's quite important here with the utes, the big rigs, the trucks, etc. Even electric luggage that people ride around on. But it's been great. The team have really done well. And I put it down to the Australian market is a really interesting place to be at the moment, I think. I think it feels very different here to almost everywhere else that we work. Canada's very enthusiastic, but the Canadians are very sensible, I would say. Australians wear their heart on the sleeve a bit more, and you can almost feel the positivity in this show. And it's been really interesting to come and spend time here and get a better understanding of what the dynamics are here. But for the benefit of those who are unaware, Australia's EV sales as a percentage of new sales is relatively low. In 2024, it was about 10%. To compare and contrast the UK, we're about 25% at the moment.
And Norway, you may as well mention
Norway. About 96% in the last month, I believe. If you wanted to look at China, for example, 25%, but of a much bigger market and growing very, very fast.
And actually, I've just read the other day, it's 51% of vehicles sold in China have a plug. So obviously the rest are plug-in hybrids. But the fact is, that's setting a precedent.
Absolutely, because of the sheer volume, and I'm sure we'll talk about China, but in Australia, what's happening is quite interesting, I think. Everywhere has this different set of geopolitics. We're going to actually take the opportunity of this podcast, I think, to talk about all the different parts of the world where we work, because it is fascinating to see the differences. But what we're seeing in Australia is a few different things play out. They are obviously really well physically positioned as part of that kind of Asia-Pacific region. Obviously, China and South Korea are driving a lot of the kind of progressive, new energy vehicles, smart new energy vehicles that are coming out. And Australia is the closest right-hand drive market. It's not the biggest market, but there is obviously value in it, and it's a great opportunity. It's quite an easy one for Chinese companies in particular to come and test the waters and work out how they best export around the world. And that proximity has really helped, but also Australia doesn't really have its native car industry
not anymore,
to protect, so it has nothing in the way of
there's
tariffs.
no tariffs or barriers,
and additionally, they've got oodles of sunshine and cheaper electricity. So a few things are playing out, but what that means is I think the enthusiasm here for EVs is more intense than I've seen everywhere else. Not to say there's no misinformation, not to say there's no pushback, there is, but to me it seems like a market that can grow really, really fast, because the competition in this hall alone says there's 35 car companies, there's probably 4 or 5 that aren't here, to be fair, 35 car companies fighting for
attention,
a relatively small population base, and that competition will lead to more choice and lower costs. And actually the costs of the cars in Australia is extraordinarily low. I'm going to do some work on that when I get home.
I know, because I've been now whenever I was talking about the MG Cyberster this afternoon with we do these live EV reviews, and because I've driven that car quite a bit, just about remember how it works, how you open the doors and everything. But I just looked at, I'd done a bit of research on the prices. So the cost of buying that car in Australia is £4,500 less than we pay in the UK for exactly the same car.
And I've seen some examples that are even bigger gaps, and it's really, really interesting, because in the UK, 25% new car sales, and we'll talk about that, we rely quite heavily on the used market. Now, 7 out of 8 car purchases in the UK are used. So for people to access EVs in the UK, it makes sense that actually the bulk of them need to go via used, and that market's growing, and I'm sure we will come on to that. But they don't necessarily need that in Australia, the used market, to quite such an extent if the new cars are more affordable in the first place. And the charging is much, much cheaper as well, may I say. So you've got this going on. They've also unlocked and opened up for bidirectional. So they recognise that potential of that. They're trying to fast track that. and actually the government have kind of sort of started that kind of train rolling. That'll be big here because of the amount of solar here, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be huge as well. So there's a whole range of different factors going on, but we think this is a real hotbed for all the types of technologies that we focus on, and a really, really interesting time. You might be aware, well, you'll be aware, I'm not sure everyone will be aware, that actually the emission standards here in Australia are really poor.
It's such a contrast.
Really poor. So they've got a new vehicle, I don't think it's a new vehicle emission standard, I think it's new vehicle.
Yes, I think it is, new vehicle emission standard.
Yeah,
I think that is
might stand for something else that's not as obvious. But anyway, it's new emission standards, someone's going to correct this in the notes, I'm sure. But they didn't have any emission standards, and it was only them and Russia that didn't.
Yes, the two countries on Earth with none at all.
That changed last year.
Yeah.
They've also got the FCAI, which is the kind of the automotive industry trade body here, are also a little bit antipathetic towards electric vehicles, shall we say. And so things have changed. They don't have an end date here in terms of 2030 or 2035.
Yeah.
They don't have a ratchet mechanism, but the NVES, the new standards, should start to drive change. And I think that's that competitive element that's going to really make a big difference. Now, I think one of the standout differences with this show is not only the range of everything electric we've got here, but also the fact we had MP and Minister for Climate Change
and
Energy or Transport?
Energy,
one of the two.
I think, but yeah, he's very
Chris Bowen
clued in. Yeah.
Came here for the second time, got on a stage with you, did a fireside chat,
answered questions,
fronted up to several hundred people in the audience, was, I thought, incredibly direct, knew his stuff.
Really knew his stuff,
I don't want to offend any of the political people I work with in the UK, but he really was what we would hope all politicians would be. Drives an EV, super knowledgeable.
Has a fully electric home, absolutely gets it.
He didn't mince his words. He was quite prepared to say if he didn't agree with something, no, we're not going to do that. So that was extraordinary, a good endorsement for the show. I think the audience really enjoyed that. So it's been 2 great days, third great day to come. We think somewhere approaching 30,000 visitors, so this show is going to have grown
mind-boggling, isn't it?
Almost.
What was the first year? 3 years. We've done it for 3 years.
I don't know actually, but last year was about 17. So it's probably doubled.
It was about 5 or 6 the first year. I mean, it was really small. That first one.
So it's got traction now, and the car companies here at least have worked out that our audience is the low funnel, as they call it in sales. It's people who've got an EV are going to get another one.
Yes.
Or people are about to get one in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And you can go lots of shows, but we actually have all the people who are actually going to buy cars.
Yeah.
Not tyre kickers.
Yeah.
We do have a trick. How do we get the early mainstream in? And I have some thoughts on that, and we'll come on to that. But the reality is the car companies now, we want more and more of this show. We want more of these shows. So to that end, just about to finish Sydney. We'll be back again in March next year.
Yeah.
We're going to do Melbourne in November. Australia's been so good to us. And honestly, I don't see why we couldn't end up doing Brisbane in the fullness of time, and maybe even Perth as well, such as the distance between the different
it's like they're in a different
states.
country.
But the positivity, the warmth of the welcome, if not the weather, we always seem to bring average weather.
Yeah, it's been a bit rainy. Actually, it hasn't. It's only rained this morning. I went out. The only time I've been outside, it was raining. But I've heard since.
Yeah,
I've looked out.
I shouldn't have brought my bikini. That's all I'm saying. I kind of overestimated how warm it would be. But it's been an amazing show.
Yeah.
And also very reflective, I think, of the fact that the world's politically and economically, its axis is turning east towards China.
I know.
And so to that end, we are also delighted that we have agreed with Elliot Richards to launch our new YouTube channel, Everything Electric Australasia.
It's just brilliant.
We've only done a pilot episode so far, and we were fortunate to have Elliot representing Shanghai, DK Kim representing Seoul in Korea. We had Sarah Aubrey representing Sydney,
Australia,
and Gavin Shoebridge from New Zealand as well. And that was fascinating to talk about all the differences between those markets. And we've actually basically taken over Elliot's existing EV channel. So there's loads of Chinese cars on there you can see. But if you Google everything or YouTube Everything Electric Australasia, now you can see loads of existing content.
Right.
And we'll be building that on that over the coming years. So please obviously subscribe to Fully Charged. So please subscribe to Everything Electric Show and also Everything Electric Australasia as well, as if there wasn't enough content. But I don't think we could be more effusive about Australia. And actually, we have an election coming up here,
Yeah.
and it is possible that that might slow things down a little bit if the nuclear supporting Peter Dutton gets into power. But I can't understand why a country with a fusion reactor in the sky and plentiful sunshine would want to go down the nuclear path. They've made so much progress with solar.
I know.
So much progress with big batteries, now with EVs, to an extent with wind turbines. They've got Snowy 2.0 coming on, the hydro.
Big hydro
they
stuff.
don't really need to do it, but it's not our job to interfere. We can't interfere. It wouldn't make any impact, but we just have to watch and wait and see what the election holds in April. But Australia for us is at the moment one of our favourite places to be.
Yeah, no, it has been, it's a huge privilege to be here. I just think we're very lucky to be able to do this. It is really incredible. But let's go back across the world to Blighty, to old Britain. I mean, I've really lost touch with what's going on in the UK, but I mean, I think it's important to remind ourselves that, we passed 1 million EVs quite a long time ago now. We're still, and there is still growth in that sector.
It's a good news, bad news story in Britain. It's interesting because EV sales in Australia have been a little bit slow the last 2 or 3 months, and we always say, actually, don't look at the quarter, don't even look at the 6 months, look at the yearly trends and see how things are progressing. On that front, the UK is actually a really, really positive story, but there is a bit of a lingering gloom in the UK economically, I think. There's talk of inflation here in Australia, talk of inflation in North America and in many countries around the world. But actually in the UK, I have to admit to being frustrated. I think Brexit has crippled our economy. And I think the new government are not going to fix it in 9 months. It's probably going to take them their full term to get it back to anything like growth. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But at the moment, it does feel like, after lots of inflation, post the mini budget Liz Truss oversaw, post EV incentives being taken away, 2030 being moved back to 2035 before it goes back again to 2030. That has created, a much flatter market, and actually EV sales sort of flattened out for a good period of time. And I have to say, I think that Brexit is dragging on us like an anchor. There is talk as we speak of us getting a bit closer to the EU because of what's going on across the Atlantic. It seemed to be, strategically advantageous to get a bit closer to the EU again, which I think would probably be good. But I think some of the damage is done, if I'm completely honest, and it will kind of continue to be a bit of an anchor for some time. But in the UK, just to bring people up to speed, in February, the month just gone, 25% of new car sales were electric.
I know. I mean, I think that's the point I want to make, that flattening sales does not mean they've stopped. It means they're not going up. So they're still at 25%, which is a huge number. It's a lot of cars.
So before the election last summer, the number was kind of averaging out about 15, 16% a month. And that had been like that for a couple of years. If you plot the Dutch market trajectory against the UK market trajectory from 2022 onwards, they diverged from us because we withdrew the plug-in car grant, the charger grant, and so on and so forth. So they kept growing, and they're now over at 30%. We stayed at sort of 15 to 16%. Ironically, they have actually now started to remove some of their subsidies. But in the meantime, just the change of government last year, even though the 2030 thing isn't absolutely sewn up, I mean, it's expected that it's definitely going to happen. It's on all the brochures, 2030, etc., etc. They're just looking at the flexibilities within the zero emission vehicle mandate in the UK. It immediately spurred some improved sales. So new car sales were constantly above 20% from about August onwards last year. They were actually over 30% in December. January is a record month. I think it was about 25%, 25% again in February. So actually you've seen us get to more like averaging 25% on a regular basis. And it's not hard to imagine that we might go over 30% at this current growth rate. Meanwhile, petrol and diesel are a little bit
down.
So how there's bad news about EV sales when
there's much
actually
worse news.
Fossil fuel sales are down.
Typical, isn't it?
And some voices in the car industry are saying, well, it's due to unsustainable levels of discounting that people are buying EVs. And they don't really want them, of course, Robert, but just because of the discounts. But obviously what's happening is a correction in the pricing of EVs. Maybe they were a little bit too expensive to begin with. Let's be honest. Now, actually, they're often coming out cheaper. And the reality is that people are becoming more and more aware of that.
Yeah.
And the used EV market is also growing very fast, over 50% growth last year, because the new market feeds the used market, right? So we had 382,000 EV sales in the UK new ones, and 188,000 second-hand ones. So I think that's something like over 500,000, 570,000. Our electric vehicle car park is now 1.4 million out of a total car park of 35 million. So we're still a long way to go.
Tiny percentage.
Only sort of 30, 40, 50,000 new EV sales per month, but it is the bit of the market that's growing.
Yes. Yeah.
And yes, some people are buying it through generous salary sacrifice schemes, but quite often that's the best deal on the table.
Yeah.
So as an individual, you're going, well, I could buy a used car, great.
Yeah.
Or I can buy a new one via salary sacrifice. I just need to speak to my company.
Yeah.
So of course people are going down those two routes, and there's less in the middle of the sort of private buyer. So it is actually a really, really good news story. I think that the car companies are struggling though.
Yeah.
It feels like they're struggling in the UK. I think it's layers of different things, Brexit being a big one, that they are just working through a very, very complex range of different problems that they have. It's costing them a lot of money. And obviously, many of the car companies still sell lots of petrol and diesel engines, and those ones in particular are struggling. Whereas the ones that we speak to are often they're the Koreans, the Chinese, Tesla. Those are the ones that are very much we want to sell. Almost all pure EVs, if not all pure EVs, and that's where the action is at. And actually, in this show in Australia, what's interesting is you do see the whole VW group is here, fighting against Zeekr and Deepal. And XPeng and BYD and so on and so forth. But in the UK at the moment, those established brands are really not on the scene, and they have basically vacated the scene, and they are letting the Chinese companies, the Korean companies, Tesla, dominate sales. It's really interesting to watch, and it's kind of hard to fathom why. You can only assume because they've got so much economic pressure that they can't afford to attend the shows, etc. We always think a big bellwether is, are they coming to meet all our EV drivers and potential EV drivers at our show? And some of the brands come every single time, and others won't even return an email, which is, to us, pretty extraordinary.
Baffling. Well, also because that's the real confusion for me, is that we'll be in touch with their PR teams about the cars. So we'll film the cars, and they'll want us to film the cars, and they'll facilitate that, and they'll send a car to me or to Jack, and we can do that. But they won't come to the show.
Well, it is frustrating. And maybe it's a British thing, maybe it's a cultural thing. But at the moment in Australia, we can talk directly to the most senior people at Australian car companies. In the UK, we pitch in, our team, not me, our team will pitch into the marketing teams in the UK, and they will ghost them.
Right.
They will never hear back. They'll give us a call and say, can you feature the car? The PR guys and the marketing people will ghost us. And that is unfortunately slightly frustrating. And I would argue that, are they really paying attention? Because our shows, for example, are the single best way of meeting
and our shows
existing
in the
EV
UK
drivers and potential EV drivers. So it is a frustration. It's not a whinge, but it always strikes us as fascinating. So we've got Everything Electric London coming up in April, which we're looking forward to delivering. But you're going to see, as you can tell from my utterings, you're going to see quite a lot of the Chinese and the Korean brands and Tesla there. And hopefully we'll be able to persuade a few others to be there. I know Renault are coming. Very excited about that. I think the Renault 5 is the star car of the year. Because I think it's the sort of car that will make even non-motorheads go,
oh, I like that.
I want one of those. So we're very, very excited about that. And then, of course, Farnborough is our kind of longest standing show. That takes place in October, and we're really looking forward to delivering that. So the UK market is interesting, has actually lots of good news story, but just feels a bit more miserable.
Right.
And I think it has been a hard 2 or 3 years, because the predictions were it'd probably be about 30% new car sales already.
Right.
That hasn't happened. And of course, the whole industry geared up around a certain level of growth, which didn't materialise. And as you'll know, we did a show 3 years ago where lots of charger companies. Lots of charger companies, and of course, if there are less cars being sold, there's not enough charging, not demand.
And I think we should specify this is home charging equipment.
I mean, it's not spoken about because people don't want to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm only speaking about it now because the EV market's growing again in the UK. But a lot of the companies that represent our exhibitor base in the UK went out of business. A lot. And so obviously that's the dynamic that's played out. I am very optimistic things are growing, and I think second half of the year will be even better. because the ZEV mandate targets are more fresh in people's minds.
Right. Yeah.
And what we saw last year in the UK was the ZEV mandate was the industry was expected to sell 22% of its sales would be electric.
Right.
And we hit about 19-20%
Right.
As an industry. There were no fines, but there was enough of a carrot and a stick, basically, to get industry to start playing the game. And some manufacturers have done a really good job. Others have struggled. This year, 22% goes up to 28%.
Right.
And I think the industry will make it. But there are people who are saying it's impossible.
Right,
and I'm thinking, I'm not sure it is impossible. It's impossible for certain brands.
Yes.
And sometimes that's
difficult.
what you see in the media, isn't it? So-and-so is, EVs sales are struggling. You don't know your EV sales are struggling.
That's very important.
Others are doing very well. And unfortunately, journalists in the UK, we're educating those a lot, but they don't understand the difference. So UK is, I think, actually at something of a turning point, but it has been a really, really tough 3 years.
Yeah. So let's quickly talk about Canada, because that has become, it's one of another of the highlights of the year, the show in Vancouver. It's just very hard to go, oh, Vancouver's boring. No, it's not. It's just a most amazing city. It's just, when we're on stage in Vancouver, I'm sure you remember, and you look out the massive window at the other side of the huge hall, and there's mountains with snow on them in the middle of summer.
With no disrespect to the Sydney Showground or to Farnborough, or any of the other venues that we use, Vancouver Convention Centre is hands down the most beautiful venue I think we've ever been. Big glass windows that look across the water, look to the mountains,
and with the air taxis taking off.
It is absolutely stunning. We, I think, got something like 30 car makers at that show. That was a record until we came here to Sydney, where we've beaten that. And the Canadian market is pretty good for EVs, but it's particularly good in British Columbia. We have the support of BC Hydro, with a state energy provider, and they've helped us to develop a show there. But people from British Columbia, Vancouver, they're close to nature, so there's quite an environmental feel about the people who live there. Sort of relatively affluent part of the world as well. So it's been a very, very safe harbour for us. And that show will grow again for this year. Although we are looking askance at America and saying, well, to what extent will that affect tariffs impact Canada? Although I did see an interesting idea from a Canadian politician the other day who said, if America's going to tariff us and make our life harder, we should let Chinese cars in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I did think, selfishly, and for the benefit of the Canadian consumer, I did think, that sounds like a solid plan. Because at the moment they've kind of hewed to the line that America have taken, but actually I think Canadian consumers will be looking at these Chinese-made EVs and going, why can't we get hold of these? I'm sure Americans are looking at that as well, but that doesn't.
I've heard them. They say it all the time.
That doesn't look like a realistic prospect in the near future. So our show just above the border. Might be a good opportunity for some Americans to come and check out what's there as well.
I'm sure you will have spoken to them as well, but the amount of Americans I meet in Vancouver who've driven up, I always remember from the first year with a guy driven up from Austin, because he'd come to the show in Austin, Texas, and he went, I love it, I want to go, and he drove all the way up to Vancouver, which is quite a long way.
Yeah, Vancouver, percentage of car sales is always comparable with California. And often it overtakes it, so that shows you where it's at. It's really, the adoption levels are very high there. And to anyone who's listening from America wants us to go back and do our live show in America, we're keen. But until we have certainty, it's difficult. And also, frankly, without the Chinese car companies, the show it's
a hard one
it's got less of the stuff that it needs, because actually sometimes you need the Chinese car companies to motivate the others to come and participate.
Join in.
But short of that, we might do Toronto one day as well as Vancouver. But no, we're going back to Vancouver in September, and we're looking forward to that. But it's just a little bit too early to say, because Canada's got elections coming up, what that looks like. And maybe recent events with Trump has maybe made some Canadians think, we don't want that. So we'll have to see.
I'm sure it's made some Canadians think that. I don't know how many. Now, we've mentioned China a lot, but I think it's not even the elephant in the room. It's the room. It's kind of beyond anything like that. It's such a huge power in the world, really, regardless of anything else. If nothing else, and it's kind of coming to the fore because you know, this is my personal feeling, but it feels like America is withdrawing from its commitments around the world, and China is definitely going to expand. And I'm not saying this because I think it's good. I'm saying this because I think it's happening. I don't know, you know.
There's a meme I saw online which said something along the lines of CIA discovers Chinese plan to let America kind of destroy itself.
Yes.
Basically. And I think it's interesting to watch. To what extent is America going through something of a trauma?
Yeah.
In that it has been the powerhouse.
Yeah, for all our lives.
For our whole lives. It has
World War
absolutely
II,
towered over my youth.
Yeah.
My latter years. You know,
Yeah.
it's been the country I've always looked to as the beacon of hope and humanity.
With incredible innovation and invention and manufacturing and doing amazing things.
And now I think its reaction to the fact that China is overtaking it in almost all of the technology space. So it's not just EVs, it's things like DeepSeek.
Yeah.
I think that is almost like it's going through a reaction to that, and it's sort of withdrawing, as you say. And China is extraordinarily well placed.
Yeah.
And they have played a long game, a patient game. They've built up the battery supply chain. While others doubted that the new technology would come through, new technology does come through. While others have distracted themselves with the possibility of hydrogen, because it's more similar to the sort of fuels that they're used to, China has just known what's going to work. They've got on with it, and now they're kind of reaping the rewards. So in this exhibition hall today, we walked around and did a press tour yesterday. We had over 100 people did a press tour, best attended one we've ever had.
Yes, it was.
And we talked through all the cars, and there was an amazing Audi S6 on the Audi stand. And the Volkswagen Group are here, and they're doing some fantastic stuff. They've got a new brand called On EV, which is about helping consumers, even things like future value guarantees and battery certificates.
Health,
I mean, really phenomenal stuff. So I'm not doing them down. The Audi S6 is one of the sexiest cars I've ever seen. But then we stood at Skoda. The Skoda cars are nice, but they're probably a little bit more like cars used to be. And then we span round onto the Zeekr stand, and I saw 3 or 4 cars that just blew my mind. They look so modern, and actually, Zeekr and Tesla have been the 2 busiest stands here.
Oh, have they? Oh, right, I didn't know that. Right, okay.
A couple of the Zeekr cars are just unbelievable. And then you've got some great cars over at XPeng, some great cars at BYD, and so on and so forth. And the reality is that these cars are extremely high quality. Like, you've reviewed a lot of them. It's not fair to say that they're lesser cars.
No.
Some of them are as good as the German cars, who I think is the ultimate compliment, right?
Yeah. Oh, they are definitely interior quality.
And the tech is
unbelievable.
Often better.
Yeah.
Which is, when I now look at what car I might get, I actually, tech plays a huge role in that. Not how it drives or how it looks, but actually how it works. A bit like if I was going to change my iPhone, I'd really hesitate to move away from an iPhone because I'm used to the operating system. And in the case of, let's say Tesla, for example, used to the supercharging network, then that becomes a big part of the decision-making process. Well, with no disrespect, VW has had some issues with its software, for example, in the ID3 and ID4, whereas you get in some of the Chinese cars and the tech is off the scale good. So it is really, really interesting to watch.
I mean, we've got to mention it, the cost is, it's less reflected in the UK, but it's still cheaper. I mean, and like if you're buying a Chinese car here, people in England will weep at how cheap it is, because
I mean, I think I'm going to get the number wrong, so I might put what the right number is in the notes. But as I understand it, we sold 382,000 new EVs in the UK, making us the biggest market in Europe, just ahead of Germany. Germany's population is 14 million, so that's quite a big deal. That makes the UK more attractive as an export option to China. But for example, I think China's sold about 2.8 million battery electric vehicles last year. That's
in China.
In China.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's scale.
Yeah.
And when you get scale, you get cost reduction.
Yes, yeah.
And ultimately, they are now looking to leverage that skill, leverage that cost reduction into all of these other countries. Yeah. And so it looks inevitable, I think, what's going to happen. They're going to get cheaper, the tech's going to get better, they're going to win more and more customers. And as we've said many times, this is a game of musical chairs. Yeah. And for those that are putting their head in the sand, I think it's going to be pretty brutal, if I'm honest.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. So now, the other thing you've been doing, which I think is amazing, and I was at the launch of it, but I know about it, is Electric Vehicles UK, which is critically important. And I mean, I'd like to quickly discuss that with you. I mean, does I feel like it complements other electric vehicle organisations in the UK rather than dominates them or pushes them out the way. I mean, you're working with them, but this is to basically counter the kind of just the ridiculous negative stuff about electric vehicles and renewable energy and clean technology in general.
Well, the genesis of it was that we were finding misinformation to be a bigger and bigger problem. Selfishly, it starts to impact our business.
Yeah.
We are mythbusters, are we not? We're used to doing that. And so we couldn't really sit on our hands. And I have sort of partly political, definitely a communications background, and we felt that we couldn't just
sit back and let it
sit
wash
back.
over us. Yeah.
So some of our audience will remember we started the Stop Burning Stuff Patreon page, and by the way, the contributions to that are still vitally
really
important.
Critically important. Yeah.
We then started to fight misinformation with our good friend Quentin Wilson.
Yeah.
We definitely made an impact, but it was from a financial perspective, David fighting Goliath. And so, as you remember, at the Aurora conference in Oxford, Greg Jackson from Oxford said, how can we turn this into something more corporate? Isn't Stop Burning Stuff, doesn't sound like a just stop oil.
Yes.
And we can get the whole industry behind one cause. I think the industry had struggled in the UK a little bit economically. And so everyone had been getting their heads down, but they've become quite siloed. And we basically turned Stop Burning Stuff into Electric Vehicles UK to bring the whole industry together. And that's what the first 6 months has been about, bringing the whole industry together. Not duplicating effort, but understanding what everyone does and trying to be the umbrella organisation that coordinates effort.
Yeah.
There is some amazing work going on, and I will name check, for example, EVA England, which is a drivers association, for example, as one really good example.
Yeah.
We're not looking to supplant
No.
what they do. We're actually just looking to be in touch with them, understand what they do, and let them get on with it while we help out. And that's been really amazing 6 months, bringing people together.
Right.
Some people are very suspicious when you try and do that, We're not charging people. Fully Charged Show and Octopus in Year One are funding that activity. But it's brought me back to some of my old skill set, I suppose, which is political and communication.
Yeah.
And we now have an organisation called Electric Vehicles UK, which is going to be a separate organisation. We've set it up in Fully Charged Show Limited just to get it rolling.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a separate entity that ultimately was our gift to the industry to help fight misinformation, but more than that, to stop focusing just on the misinformation, continue to fight it, but actually spend 80% of our time reinventing the narrative.
Yeah.
Because we get very distracted by, there's a fire here,
Yeah.
There's a car park that's collapsed here, all rubbish, by the way, and actually it's very easy to play that game.
Yeah.
And actually forget the real game is to reinvent the positive narrative, because there's plenty of positive things to say. So we've made real progress bringing the industry together. The next phase is that we will be writing a membership prospectus.
Right.
And that will be available in early April for companies to join formally. That will give us a fighting fund, effectively, from September, so we can do more and more activity. But just to give you an example of the couple of things that we've already done. We've set up a website, electricvehicles.expert or electricvehicles.uk,
right,
which isn't just about Fully Charged Show content, it's about all content in one place. So we, as an industry, can send interested parties to that. It's got all the information that you could ever need about electric vehicles. More recently, we commissioned a report with a company, great think tank called New Automotive.
Yes.
And the report is called The Cost of Driving Electric.
Right.
And for us, the single biggest barrier is cost.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there are concerns about charging and there are other factors. But if you can communicate the cost benefits of electric vehicles, you will win more minds by doing that than any other single action. And so what we felt it was important to do was get a holistic view of the total cost of ownership.
Right.
And that 32-page report we've just published is so instructive, so powerful. And now our job is not to abandon that. Our job is to put that in the hands of as many people as we can around the world. And just some quick findings, basically. Over the lifetime, let's start at the beginning. 80% of people can save using an EV.
Yeah.
This is no surprise to us, probably.
No.
But that message isn't out there,
It
right?
isn't out there, no.
You speak to people today, they will say EVs are more expensive.
Yeah.
We now need to say no. We don't need to be
cheaper.
polite.
Yeah.
Say no, they are cheaper and they will save you money. 80% of people can save. Obviously, people with driveways are in a stronger position than the people without, and I don't want to leave anyone behind, so that's important too. But the second part is over the lifetime, so the term of ownership, which is 3 or 4 or 5 years within the report. The report is very, very detailed. People are saving almost £6,000 over that term. That's on one car. If you have 2 cars, you might be saving almost £12,000, right? If you run a fleet, imagine how much you might be saving.
And that's why the fleets are
crucial. And then used EV sales, which is a growing market in the UK. Now the new market is feeding the used market. You can get great cars for maybe some at 5k, but more at the 10k mark. Great cars that are going to last for a very long time. Now we know that for certain. And actually, on average, those used cars are £2,800 cheaper than the petrol and diesel.
Right, the petrol and diesel car of the same age and mileage and all the rest of it. Right, yeah.
So now we can go back and we can say, no, it is cheaper. And actually, let's not get distracted by all the noises off. Let's hammer that message home until everyone in the UK and everyone in the world understands it. And one of the things that's interesting that's happening is that we are sort of joining hands with people like the Electric Vehicle Council in Australia.
Right.
Hopefully ELBIL, which is the Norwegian EV Association, with people in America, to create with the e-mobility guys in Europe as well, to create an overarching body that actually can really push back as a whole, getting organised basically. Getting organised, getting vocal, because there are tons of benefits of battery EVs, cost being only one, and we need to own the narrative. We need to work on that. So it's been a privilege to work on that, and as I say, there's much more to come. It's nice to have 2 jobs. I mean, you know, I'm not busy enough.
Because you were so lazy when you run fully charged. I don't know. I don't even want to ask how you managed to do it all. It's not drugs. I just want to say that it's not drugs.
Too old for drugs.
Although there's a very small amount of beer.
Anti-arthritis drugs. But I don't think that's giving me energy.
It is. I can't. This is what I can't believe, and it does. I'm not altogether thrilled about this because it just makes me feel even older, but it's the 15th birthday of Fully Charged Show this year, so we're going to have a little, I don't think we know quite what, some sort of celebration, sort of June, July time for that. But it is, what is really critical about it is the change that's happened in that 15 years. That's what I really want to reflect. You know, that in 15 years ago you could, I wouldn't suggest it was a good idea, but you could buy a Mitsubishi i-MiEV or a Tesla Roadster, or probably a Citroen. You might be by 2010, you could probably have got the Citroen equivalent of the Mitsubishi. I don't know what else. It was pre-Nissan Leaf,
I think you're right. I think 2010, you had the incredible foresight to set it up. It, for me, was amazing when I discovered what you'd done, because I was going to loads of business conferences where everyone was saying, "Aren't batteries great? Aren't battery EVs great? Aren't solar great?" And I was like, I kind of need to get out and tell the world about this, right? And you'd already started to do that. So when we met, you know, back in 2016, I thought, well, I'm really passionate about this. I drive an EV. I've been promoting these technologies, and I think it was just, I don't know, happenstance that we met, right? I feel very fortunate that it happened. And I thank you very much for giving me the kind of latitude to kind of develop the business over that time. But I think it almost splits into 2 sections. You've got the first sort of 7 years, I suppose, before I was involved, where you'd built this incredible thing and we're really standing on your shoulders. And you're right, what was there at that point in 2010? Bugger all.
Yeah, very, very little.
Then we did the first live events, and then there was about 10, 12 decent cars at that point.
Yes,
we could probably name check them.
Then,
the Zoe, the Leaf, Model S, Model X, etc.
Yeah, because that was that pre-Model 3? Yes,
it was. Yeah, it was pre-Model 3. And so, you know, at that point, you know, that we entered a new phase as an organisation, and that's taken us through. Now we've delivered 18 of these events around the world in 7 years. The YouTube channel now has well over 1 million subscribers. I think it's just about to go to 1.1 million. We have the second channel. We have a third channel, and lots of other interests besides. And what we would like to do on our 15th birthday is have an event for hundreds of people, hopefully, which is part retrospective, how far we've come, and part how does Fully Charged evolve over the next 15 years. I know it's terrifying to map forward to 2040, and sometimes a bit tired after a show, might not feel like doing that, but you know, how are we going to be relevant, grow, all those sorts of things.
It'd be fascinating to, between now and then, to sort of research potentially could happen in the next 15 years, because I think it's quite remarkable what could. I mean, it's so much around batteries.
Well,
That's the thing,
Mercedes-Benz
isn't it?
talking about a solid-state battery with 600 miles range
Yeah.
by 2026. You know, I mean, that's the thing. All these things
Yeah.
that we're talking about are going to get better and better,
Yeah.
more and more efficient, cheaper and cheaper. So that's all good. I'm very, very confident about where the future is. But we will have a big event. We will invite all of our patrons
Yeah.
for Fully
That'd be
Charged
nice,
Show, for
wouldn't it?
Stop
Yeah.
Burning Stuff. We'll invite all of our investors, all
Yeah.
of our clients,
Yeah.
and other people. So I think it could be quite a big party. We will be looking for a sponsor for that, I have to say, to defray from costs, like any sensible business
Yes.
person would do.
Yeah.
But I'm really looking forward to that, because I think we've got something to announce, I think, on that day as well,
Yeah.
about how we, as I say, remain relevant, and
Yeah.
perhaps even we increase our influence over the next 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not feeling that energetic right now
No.
at the back end of a show in Australia,
Yeah,
but
it's hard to think of it. Yeah.
but it is, you know, for us, it's been an amazing journey, and we want it to continue for another 15 years.
Yeah. No, very good. Other platforms then. So, I mean, we're still mainly, you know, like 95% of all our activities are on YouTube.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, and I mean, every now and then I'll hear stuff about where people spend most of their time on screens looking at video. It's YouTube. It's far and away the most common, even though people talk about TikTok and all the rest of it, it is still there.
Yeah, so we're on X.
Yeah.
Everything Electric, Fully Charged is on X.
Yeah.
We also have the EV UK is on X as well. We're not quite as active there. How do I put this nicely? It's become a slightly more hostile environment,
Yeah.
I think, for some of the things that
Yeah.
we talk about, but we're still there. I'm personally enjoying Threads because no one follows me.
All right.
And I can just talk,
Say
and no
what you
one
like.
responds. And I have to say, I find that incredibly liberating. I know you're on Blue Sky,
Blue Sky,
I think.
yeah, which is definitely, I mean, without question, is growing and has got. It went from there's no one here to there's quite a lot of people here, and quite a lot of people I followed on what was Twitter.
Yeah.
And certainly the science people and
Yeah.
the environmental people, they're definitely gone. They've fled to Blue Sky.
We do have a very good Instagram account. We're
Yeah.
on TikTok as well. I had someone run up to me at the show this weekend, go, "Oh my God, I love you. I love your LinkedIn content." I thought she was quite odd.
Yeah.
Because we, you know,
When
but
you
it was very
post on
nice.
it, you're very good on LinkedIn. I'm not very good at that.
So that's actually taken on. A lot of people have, I think, abandoned X and gone
Yeah,
to
yeah.
LinkedIn as well. So I think we're kind of a multi-platform business. I
Yes.
think that's the phrase. I'm sure there'll be more platforms, but whatever ways we can reach out. But on YouTube, fundamentally, we've got the podcast on Mondays on Everything
Yeah.
Electric. We've got a second episode on Everything Electric, typically about homes or micromobility every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then the Fully Charged show on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then Everything Electric Australasia. They will announce.
We'll find a day.
We'll
to
announce how
release
that's
it.
gonna work, how that's gonna kind of work into our plans in the near future as well. But yeah, I mean, we're doing our absolute level best to keep the good news stories coming out in
Yeah.
a world that is quite often dominated by negative
Yeah.
social media content.
And we've got one last thing that we have announced, but we should mention, which is Zap Heap, which is it's going to be a tough ask to raise the money that we need. And I've had a couple. I just wanted to say, because I've had a couple of questions through things like Blue Sky and Threads.
Yeah.
You know, why do you need so much money? And I just want to say, you know, because it's an expensive show to make, so it will involve probably 40 or 50 people.
Yeah.
In both crew, cast, the production, everything. It's not and we will do it at a fraction of the price that the old TV show was made at. But we have to, if we're going to show two teams building something in a location out of junk and then testing it, it's going to cost money. But I reckon we can do it. But the thing I kind of want to really push is what we always wanted to do on TV Scrap Heap, which was, and we did it one or two times, where we essentially had an audience for the test.
Yeah.
And it was a really difficult thing for us to arrange to do that. It just didn't fit in with the way the show was made. And also we didn't have the kind of setting to do it. Well, we have the setting to do it here, so we're going to have, if it all goes ahead, we're going to have the test live at the Farnborough show in October, which is, I mean, I am so pumped. I'm pumped and stoked about that. I mean, I just think that could be, but I have no idea what they're going to make at the moment. We don't know what the teams are going to make, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think with your background on Scrap Heap, it's really been interesting. Like, we had the British consulate talking here last night at our Sydney show,
Wasn't that
really
extraordinary?
referencing the power of Scrap Heap and creativity through technology.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to, I mean, I think I want to point out that we didn't suggest that to
no,
them.
absolutely not.
It came out of the blue to us.
It as a program inspired a huge amount of people, and the amount of engineers you speak to now who say, I was a big fan of it, or I watched it with my father, and obviously ladies watched it as well.
And some people watched it with their mothers.
I should say quickly before I'm cancelled. But it had a huge impact, a huge resonance. It's very, very relevant. I think it's more relevant to the modern world. It's actually reusing materials. And obviously we've talked about kind of revivifying it, and we haven't been able to get a broadcaster interested in doing that. So sometimes you just got to take the bull by the horns. So we've launched a Kickstarter campaign to enable us to launch a special pilot that will enable us to create an episode and then do the live test. So probably 40 minutes of a 60-minute show will be filmed in advance, and then we'll do the live reveals, the test at Everything Electric show in Farnborough in October, and we're really looking forward to that. But as a small business, for those of you that think that we are rolling in money and we have huge profits to call up, it simply isn't true.
Just about survival.
I would say I'm a pretty ingenious business person, but it is more about survival. So when we do anything like this, frankly, we can't afford to do it at a loss.
No.
And we also want to do it to a standard that means that maybe
it's not embarrassing.
Maybe we can take it to a TV company or a streamer and say, actually, have you thought about bringing this back? I have found in years of launching new things that most people you speak to lack.
They can't see what you're talking about.
They lack imagination. And so when we've shown people the live shows, they've kind of go, I get it.
Oh, I get it.
This is the same thing. We need to be able to show them how the format works. So we have the two teams ready to go. People who have been familiar to you from the Fully Charged show over the years.
We've done, amazing teams.
We have some of the originals who worked on Scrap Heap helping us out, but it's going to be all electric. It's going to be Zap Heap, and we're very, very enthused about bringing it back. Also, those who do contribute, there's some quite nice packages and benefits that they get with those contributions as well. So I'm really looking forward to bringing it back. But we these things do not emerge out of thin air.
No.
And I think most people who listen to this will understand that these things cost money, particularly in the modern environment, with every venue, energy costs, transportation, everything else is very, very expensive. So no, we're really looking forward to do it, because I do think it's a really good synergy. Sorry, I was trying to avoid using consultant speak. I failed.
No, you can do it. You're allowed now.
Really good, really synergistic with Fully Charged show and Everything Electric. And also it gets young people interested, and I think it will be a fantastic project to run. And hopefully it will lead to a return of what we believe will be Zap Heap in the longer term. But we're not doing it to get rich. I mean, my God, if I was trying to get rich, I'd be working for the fossil fuel industry. No, I wouldn't. But I wouldn't be doing this. This is something is another passion project because we believe it's the right thing to do.
Very much so. Anyway, Dan, brill, because look, the crew have fallen asleep.
Knackered.
Yeah, we've got to let them go. We've got one more day to go. I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a blast, this show. It really has been amazing. So I want to thank you for all the incredible work you've done.
Well, I've got to stop you and thank you for starting it, but also to thank all the team.
There's whole team.
There's about 35 or 40 people across the business who make this happen, and believe me, they are some of the best people.
They are incredible.
Incredible people.
They put up with me for one thing.
And me, and it's a startup, and it's very, very, very hard work. So we are extremely fortunate. And also just thank you to the patrons. Thank you to our investors. Honestly, if people hadn't invested in the business, we didn't have patrons,
didn't do it, we wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't have made it. No. I think by the time we've done 18 of these live shows now, I think by the time we've done 30, they will be perfect.
Yes.
Because we're iterating really quickly. But we are doing something completely unknown. A YouTube events crossover is completely unknown. And we've got a lot right, much more than we've got wrong. But there are things that come up, like COVID, for example.
Yeah, that was quite difficult.
The Ukraine, inflation, EV misinformation. So we have had to battle through these, but what we're working on, I think, basically, is converting thousands upon thousands of people to these technologies and hopefully sharing those stories from around the world with saying these things are possible. And so I'm very proud to work on it, and I'm looking forward to the next 15 years with you, Robert.
Excellent, thank you. I'm now going to go and have a nap. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode. Please do tell your friends about the Fully Charged Show podcast and the Fully Charged Show and Everything Electric, and now Everything Electric Australasia. I still haven't learned that. How to do that.
We edit that.
Well, that's going to be amazing. Everything Electric Australia. But as always, do subscribe if you haven't. That's it. As always, if you have been, really seriously, thank you for watching.